That would have been odd then.
All right, we'll go ahead and get started, and I'm going to step in front of the camera just for a second so the folks online can see my ugly mug. Hey guys, my name's Greg Judy with Neil Schaefer. Trey, another engineer with us, is off to the side over here. Mark, Tony, Adam, I appreciate y'all joining online. If you would, for our benefit, if you would, in the chat box, just type your name and maybe your email address or something. I guess we've already got your email, but just as a way to kind of do a roll call, and we'll have that for the record. And then I'm going to start recording this as well, just for our purposes, but the city is...
Recording in progress.
The city's recording this also for their own purposes. We'll share my screen here, and then that should show up on the monitors here. Hopefully all this technology works. Thank you all for being here. I know there's a lot of coordination going on to try to coordinate everybody, and then finding a time that works. So that's why we wanted to have this kind of online opportunity. But again, my name's Greg Judy. I'm a vice president and senior manager with Neil Schaefer. I said Trey Todd is here with us as well. We'll get into processes and kind of methodology and kind of why we're here. I think one thing I wanted just to let y'all know is there's not been a lot of analysis done at this point. This is strictly, for the most part, just for information purposes, kind of let everybody know kind of what we're anticipating, what the city's direction the city's given us as far as we go through this analysis and study process. We're here to answer questions and have a dialogue. So again, we certainly don't have any really analysis to present today or anything like that. Again, this is more just outlining kind of what we hope to accomplish and why the city's pursuing this, and we'll get more into that here in a minute. We'll have an opportunity in a few minutes to kind of do introductions or kind of a roll call. I've got a place in here where we can do that. So again, being a little larger crowd, I won't go through I expect everybody just to say their name, raise their hand, and we'll try to put a little process in here to help facilitate that, and we'll kind of get to that. But again, we're here today to kind of talk about the city's objectives and their plan on doing what we're calling a joint study for the intersection of Beechcroft and Claiborne Road. As you all are well aware, in one facet or another, you're all involved in a development project or and the development that's going on out just over here, and that's why we're here today to kind of talk about the city's vision and their objectives and how we play a role in that as far as kind of conducting the study. So we'll just kind of get into this, and again, we'll have an opportunity to kind of, as it's shown here, kind of a roll call in a minute. And I will say that as formal as this looks, we want this to be kind of informal. Yeah, you need me on the microphone, don't you? I can't wander. I'm a wanderer. Sorry about that. Thank you. We want this to be informal to the extent that we can, and just again have a kind of a conversation and dialogue. So the bullet points here show what we hope to kind of discuss today, and again we'll kind of give a background on kind of how we got here. Obviously, we'll talk a little bit about the study area and the projects and your interests that are involved. We'll talk about kind of the methodological process of kind of the sequence of events and what we hope to accomplish over the next several weeks and a couple months. We'll get in a little bit of some of the technical discussion as far as what we've done as far as estimating trips and how vehicle trips that are generated by your different sites and different projects, and how we kind of plan to go through the methodology and going forward with that. So why are we here, and kind of how did this kind of come to be? Back, I guess last fall, maybe early winter, the city put out an RFQ for professional services for traffic engineering consultants, and they did that as a way to create a formal process to start addressing the city's traffic issues and initiatives that the city's hoping to accomplish. Galvin, I don't want to totally leave you out of some of this conversation, so if I overstep or say something you want to elaborate on, feel free to speak up. I don't really want to put words in the city's mouth, but just knowing some of the background, the city's engaged with 3 different consultants, with us being one of them, and the consultants are assigned different areas of the city, and this area for Beechcroft happens to be ours. So this is one of the first work assignments that we've been given as a part of that process. So in addition to potentially reviewing other engineers' studies that they may do for your or other developers' projects going forward, we're also on board, and all the consultants are on board to prepare independent traffic studies from the get-go, as opposed to just reviewing them. We might actually prepare them from the beginning. But what we're here today to talk about is a little bit of a hybrid and kind of a special situation, in that with so much going on at the intersection and on the corridors, the city recognized the need to basically do a collaborative, collective review of what the needs are for that intersection as it relates to the traffic generation that's expected with these developments. So that's what we hope to talk about today, and again, we'll kind of go through some of those steps. But we want to emphasize the fact that this is meant to be a transparent process. We want input. We want to be open about where we're headed and the tools we'll be using to accomplish what the city wants to achieve here. So again, that's just maybe our way of saying to please ask questions if something doesn't make sense, or if you need some clarification on something. So I'm going to move this up here. So again, just real quickly, the study intersection, the focus really is on the Beechcroft-Cleveland Road intersection, and we'll talk more specifics about that, but we're not looking at it necessarily the Beechcroft corridor as itself, or Cleveland Road going all the way to the south past the school. That's down kind of the southern part of the corridor. We're really looking at trying to objectively look at what improvements in the next the horizon period, which we'll mention over the course of these projects, to get a handle on what improvements will be needed to maintain efficient, safe operations of the intersection. And so this exhibit kind of gives an overview of the different areas involved, projects involved, and just the general, what we're calling the influence area. And just going forward, there's a lot going on. I'm still getting my head around it. And Trey is more involved in, of course, some of the detailed analysis, and Trey can do probably a better job than I can when knowing the ins and outs of your particular projects and the scale of them and so forth. And it's interesting because it's a real variety of projects, and we've got residential projects and a lot of industrial, and just a multi-use of land uses. And when it gets into the engineering side of what we do from a traffic study standpoint, it makes it really interesting to kind of put that all together and kind of figure out what it all means. So here's our roll call opportunity. So what we've tried to do with this is kind of highlight those projects. These y'all should recognize, see your name up here, and then we tried to reach out, we did reach out to individuals for all these projects that will be involved in the specifics of what we're looking at with the intersection and how your projects impact the intersection's operation. So with that, if you're close to a microphone, please feel free to kind of stretch over and speak to. And I'm just going to go down the line, and if you'll just raise your hand and obviously introduce yourself and anything else you'd like to say, we're happy to do that at this point. So the Magna site, we're in Project Titan.
Jim Kirk with Arco Murray, representing the design builder. I don't know if this. No, it's not. Also here with Matt Anderson from Kimley Horn, who's the civil engineer. Nice to be here. Thanks.
Good. Thank you for being here. Someone from Harvest Point?
The three of us are here. Am I on? Okay, how about now?
Yeah, she's giving the nod, so you're good.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, thanks.
Kelly Beasley, Harvest Point.
Kelly.
Michelle McKenna, who's
Hi, Michelle.
and Eric McNeely,
Eric.
Community Civil, who has been our engineer for pretty much since inception of the community.
Okay, good deal. Thank you for being here. Ship, I know we've talked with Ship. Yeah, there you are, Suzanne.
Hi, I'm Suzanne Jackson with Barge Coffin, and so yes, we've worked on SHIP buildings 1, 2, and 3, and then the forthcoming SHIP West on the other side of Cleveland Road.
Yeah. Thanks for being here, Suzanne. DRG 825.
I'm Michelle. I'm with Arco Murray, with the design builder, and Matt Anderson from Kimley's working on DRG as well.
It helps to have consistency, doesn't it? I get it. It's all good. Barton Hills.
Joey Smith.
Okay, Mr. Smith, I appreciate you being here. Thank you. FlexMet. Yeah, Mr. Bean.
Hi, I'm Joe Bean. I'm the owner of FlexMet and the property at 810 Beechcroft. The building
jobs to the community, and then possibly building two will be an expansion and or lease opportunity moving forward. Thank you, Joe.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
Absolutely.
And anybody for Felicia? Of course, they have an existing site that is going through an expansion as well, and then we've got some of their information as well. So appreciate you again. I don't mean to reiterate myself, but just do appreciate y'all's time. I know everybody's busy, but it's important, especially from the city side as well as us, to have this collaboration and input, and so y'all have a good kind of understanding of kind of as we go through the process of kind of what it means going forward. So just kind of boil it down here and kind of, again, kind of what we see as our sequence and steps that at a higher level of kind of what we hope to accomplish. Sounds kind of obvious, but, the first thing we need to do is kind of get our head around all the different projects involved. I'll maybe step down, I'll come down, but this is some traffic numbers we'll get to in a minute, but you can see each of those rows represent the different projects that are involved. So it's, as you imagine, it's kind of, I mean this in the most nice way, it's like kind of herding cats. We're trying to get our heads around the phasing, the timing, the size, and the type of land use, and all those different elements to the projects, which all implicate, how we go back through the analysis. So just kind of understanding the sequence and the time and the type of developments is obviously important to us. We've already done some field work, and that's really just taking some photos and just doing some ground truthing so that we can understand some of the existing conditions. I was talking to someone beforehand that in some cases there were already independent traffic studies done as a part of their submittals, as part of their approval up to this point. We're going to rely on that data as well. For those projects that didn't have a traffic study prepared, we've gone through the process of calculating those trip generations. We all use the same methodology, so it's all consistent. There's an organization called ITE. It's an Institute of Transportation Engineers, and actually it's an international organization, and they produce a lot of technical books and reference materials that we use through the course of our practice. One of the headliners is called trip generation. So there's been decades and decades worth of research that they continue to update over the years that helps us forecast is probably a better word, forecast, trip expectations. The classic example I always give is Walmart. Because, everybody can relate to Walmart. There was a particular project we were involved in that we, from scratch, we did traffic generation for a Walmart. We had the opportunity to be involved in the implementation of a traffic signal that was associated with that particular project. And the reason I'm telling you this is we were able to do traffic counts after the fact as a part of that traffic signal being open and be able to do the traffic signal timings and implement those timings. Well, just because I guess we were interested, we went back and checked the actual traffic counts and compared that to what we forecast using that ITE, and it was within 10% or so. So I'm not saying it's always works out quite that well, but it's national-based data, but there's a lot of more sophisticated things that I don't understand when it comes to statistical analysis and number crunching and stuff that they do to normalize that data, and then that's how we use that. So I just say that to know that we're using pretty standardized data, and it's the same data that's used in a lot of the traffic studies that have been probably prepared for your all's projects in the past and will be in the future. But the point is that we, in addition to just generating the trips, we have to then assign those trips to the street network and entering and exiting volumes, which direction they're going. Are they heading south? Are they heading back toward the parkway or whatnot? And for those studies that were available to us, we've used that information. Again, we want to be consistent with what's been done in the past. So the message here is we've relied on and used where that information is available through previous studies that we're using that information. So once we kind of have that cataloged and those traffic numbers established, we'll go through procedures, again, based on national protocol and our industry standards to do capacity analysis. And you all probably have seen the terminology level of service. It's the A to F grade, and it really is based on travel delays. So an average over a typical peak hour average, there's thresholds of delay. You get to a certain point, you get to E's and F's, just like the days in school. That's not good, not necessarily. I will say as time goes on, generally anything level surface D and better is what we like to see. When you get to E's and F's, that's generally, we start looking at modifications or mediation to try to address those. I will say there's, not necessarily here in Spring Hill, but in Nashville, there are intersections we'd love to get an F, like a good F, if there is such, like a good F. So I say that there's shades of gray there. Just because it's an F doesn't necessarily mean, it can mean one thing versus another depending on just how bad. So we don't rely just on an A through F letter grade. We actually look at the delay and the queuing and the storage lengths of the turn lanes and so forth. And that's the kind of nuts and bolts process that we'll get into. So as it relates to how this all affects you all and as we go through our process with the study, the city is envisioning procuring and administering a city-led improvement project. We don't know what that is right now. That's why we're here, and that's part of the process. But the city has the goal of your all's projects, groups to participate in that endeavor. And we had the occasion and the opportunity to do something similar for the city of Gallatin in the past, so we've got a little bit of experience in figuring out what we're calling an equitable share process. And at the end of the day, it's kind of based on the peak trips that each site develops in relation to what the needs are at the intersection. And we look at that at a forecasted year out. So to give you a little bit of a deeper dive into that, so if you can visualize these 9 or 10 projects spread around the influence area, one thing is, and I'll probably show this again in a minute, one number is the number of trips that are generated by your site. Well, not all your trips are going to go through this intersection. So that when we recognize that and then we catalog and measure that, what we're interested in is the actual trips and the peak hour that are passing through different movements through this intersection, and then we'll go through a process of establishing what that equitable share and percentage is based on the estimated cost of the project when we get to that point. So don't get too nervous or too worried. We'll get more into explanation, try to answer questions as we get to that point. Again, today's just more about outlining kind of the process and the general intent of what the city hopes to achieve, and then what we envision as that process kind of going through there. So let me take a moment to stop. We're going to get a little more into some more technical things and more specific methodology that we'll use through the course of the study, but I like to take a pause if there's any questions or anything that we can help clarify or answer at this point, just other than why we're here and the general process, and anything that we can help clarify at this point. Making sense? Okay, well, that's a good thing. That's a good thing. Please don't try to read these numbers. It's not meant to be read. The reason Trey and I wanted to include this here, particularly ones that are on the Zoom, could probably zoom in and look closer, is just the number of projects involved. I mean, this is a big deal, and we don't take that lightly. I will say again, I'll just kind of read off because I can see it here, standing here. In all, with all these projects that we went through earlier, round numbers, the peak period is looking at 2,000 trips in this area that we're talking about. Now, again, not all those trips are going to pass through the intersection. That's just the total generation of the sites. But that'll give you a scale of the kind of the impact or the level of volume that the analysis is going to be looking at, and how that will flow through the peak hour at the intersection. So we drill down a little bit deeper. These are peak volumes. We went ahead and kind of broke them out. You can probably pick your project off and kind of get a sense. That italicized heading at the top is important. Again, I just want to keep reiterating that not all these trips will be passing through the intersection. At this point, we've not assigned.
Hey, Greg, if you can hear me, can you unmute yourself?
Oh my goodness. I am so sorry. Yep. Thank you. I will back up and as we get through this, I'll go back and I didn't realize I was muted. So thank you for letting me know. Wish I'd known that sooner. But I'll back up and we're moving through this pretty quickly so we can go back and answer any questions as y'all were looking at the slides. Tell you what, let me go ahead and do that right now. So I want to get that straight. So I apologize. I didn't realize I was muted on that. Anybody on the call, Mark, or anyone else, as we were going through the slides, can I answer any questions to the extent that I can of what we're talking about, which obviously you weren't able to hear. But I think the overall point that I would make, if I had to back up and kind of give a summary, would be that the highlighted projects, as you saw, we went through a roll call of folks that are here. let me start with this as I kind of collect my thoughts. For you all on the call, if you want kind of just one by one, just introduce yourselves, and we can't hear you through the audio, and let me stop and let you all do that. So, Mark, if you want to do that first, and then everybody else can just follow up. So, Mark, please go ahead.
Yeah, this is Mark Keller with Agricel. We are the owners of the Forsythia property.
Thank you, Mark. Tony, Mr. Wyman, do you want to go next? You're muted if you're responding.
Yeah, sorry about that. Tony Wyman with Goodall Homes, and we're the owner developers of the Harbor Valley subdivision up off of Beechcroft.
Great. Thanks for being on the call, Tony. And then Josh, Mr. Thacker.
With Tony, Harbor Valley Development, Goodall Homes.
Super. Thank you. And I do sincerely apologize. I did not realize I was muted with that. So, what we were talking about, just the general process. I'll hit the highlights of this because it's important for you all to be aware. Again, we're one of 3 consultants that have been retained by the city, and we're able to do a variety of different traffic engineering projects for the city. But in this role, it's a very unique and interesting project to do a collaborative approach on looking at how all these different developments will be impacting the intersection at Cleburne and Beechcroft. And so again, the projects that you see listed on the screen that are both here in the room and on a remote link are the ones that will be participating, in that process. Yeah, for sure. Yep.
Hi.
Go ahead, Calvin.
My name is Calvin Abram. I'm the Director of Development for the City of Spring Hill. I wanted to identify first so we won't have any conclusion. I invited, and Greg invited several developers to this meeting and their representatives. And the way we determined those developers were through conditions that have been placed on those developments by the Planning Commission and or the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. So if you have a condition that identifies you will either make a construction to some point of Beechcroft, of the intersection of Beechcroft at Cleburne, or a financial contribution, you were invited to this meeting by myself or Greg Judy. We may or may not have people that are attending this meeting that are here and they are not required to make a contribution or to develop or be part of the development. But I can assuredly say our elected officials, our mayor and board of mayor and aldermen have had heard concerns from our residents, developers, business owners. Our planning commissioners have heard comments about the intersection, as well as our city administrator and staff. We have all heard comments and or received some type of input. We're taking that consideration in as a whole, as well as having this meeting today to gather your input until ultimately the end goal will be to share out potential preliminary design and or concepts and to identify the pro rata equitable share of who will do what and who will do whatever. However, that is based upon only those developments that have a condition, and if you don't have a condition, it will not apply to you for a financial, monetary, or construction type of contribution.
Quick question for you, Calvin. For those of us who are financially contributing, I know we don't know the timeline of the project quite yet, and that depends on the analysis, but at what point would that financial contribution be levied? When design is complete, as a reimbursement, when construction is complete? Do we have an idea of that yet?
That can be something we can have a further conversation on. I think some conditions may have a softer timeline attached to it, but if they're not, and if it's not clear, we can have a further conversation.
Okay, great.
And if y'all heard that, are you able to hear that discussion on the call? If not, I'll repeat that.
Yeah, I can hear.
Cool, great. Thank you, Mark. Appreciate that. Yes, so the timelines. We don't know. We'll know that as we get further down. But I appreciate y'all talking about that. So again, we hope to have, as the screen shows, we've already completed the kind of the field work and some initial data development. That red asterisk shows that we're here with kind of the first of 3 stakeholder outreach opportunities, and so we'll be coming back together. We predict two more times after we do an analysis. The second time, next time we come together will be after we do our initial analysis and have initial idea what the recommendations and certainly what the analysis results are, so you all can have a picture of kind of what we've come up with, and we share that with you all and have that discussion, and then we'll come back a third time that's basically going to finalize, everything. We hope that the second meeting foreshadows things, so the third meeting is really, there's no surprises, it's just kind of tying up loose ends and kind of putting a bow on things, if you will. But the next meeting we'll get more detailed in terms of the type of analysis results, and then what the type of improvements and initial thoughts of what that equitable share, contribution will be. And again, guys, on the phone call, I'll spend a few minutes talking about what that equitable share process would look like, and I was discussing that in a previous project that we've actually had some experience with. It's based on the peak hour trip that each site contributes to at the intersection itself, and then we do kind of a normalization and an equalization of that over the course of all the projects to have that kind of a fair and balanced process. And we'll work through that as we get into that probably the next time we get together and be able to talk about that. But the point today is to really just kind of get that on the table and kind of give folks an idea of kind of what that looks like, and the intent that it is meant to be transparent and equitable, and that it's just kind of done through a kind of a fairness and equitable type of way. I'll skip over that. So again, these are the projects. As I spoke on earlier, we've done some initial estimates of what the trips are, and then you can see here the different projects have been itemized with what we project right now as overall AM and PM peak trips. But again, these are not necessarily trips that are passing through the intersection. They've not been assigned to the overall street network, and they're kind of the directional paths that those trips will take. But that's generally what we're looking at as far as the relationship between different projects and how that will play out.
Greg, can I ask a question?
Yeah, for sure.
Is the SHIP 2, is that just based on the driveways on Cleburne?
So as far as the trip generation, or just the
Yeah.
site? So each different land use has a different independent variable that we use. So for most of if it's residential, it's based on the number of unit of houses, but in a manufacturing or light industrial standpoint, it's based on square footage of the building. So those trips that you're seeing are based on that mathematical computation things that I was talking about earlier, but it's based on the square footage of the building. Now, as far as the assignment of the trips, we do look at the driveways and their orientation of whether they're closer to the intersection or closer to the bypass, or just in terms of our thoughts on what paths or what those trips are most likely to take. We use a number of information to try to figure that out. The TDOT counts that are out there as far as like existing what we call ADT, their average daily traffic volumes, the 24-hour counts. We get we can get those broken down by hour, so we generally know in a higher level is the majority traffic going one way or another, and that helps inform us as to how we assign the percentage, just what we call distribution of those trips on the street network. So it's kind of like throwing a recipe of like a cake batter together, and you kind of mix it together and try to get a sense of what kind of how it all comes together. But generally speaking, the trips themselves are based on that ITE, that trip generation manual that we use as far as the formulas and whatnot. But as far as the assignments of the trips, it just kind of depends on what the street network is and where the attractions and generators are, and just trying to figure that out. So I don't know if that answers your question or not.
Those are just the totals then?
Yes, those are just the totals for the AM and the PM peak. And again, so for instance, for Project Titan that has 22 in the AM peak, I mean that some of those may be coming north on Cleburne, some of them might be coming from the west, going eastbound, and vice versa, westbound. And so it really depends where your specific project's located and where your driveways are in relation to the intersection. And some projects will have a lot more impact on the intersection than others. And as we Trey's actually started working on some of those estimates of those trip distributions, and
and we will itemize those, right? And we itemize those so we know individually. And again, that's why I was making the point earlier about if there was a traffic study done already for your particular development, that study had that information already prepared, so we're not going to recreate that. We're going to use that. The ones that we'll get more involved with as far as the distribution and generation of the trips are for those projects that didn't have a traffic study that's already exists for that. So, good question. Yeah, there's a lot of numbers, unfortunately, but it's part of the madness. A little more specifics of our methodology and kind of where we're going from here. We did collect updated traffic counts, so we weren't sure. Let's backtrack 3 or 4 weeks, late April, early May. Things were moving fast. We're trying to kind of get our heads around what was going to be required to take on the study, and we knew the end of school was coming up soon. So we, in fact, Joe, another project we're working with the city and one of Joe's, Mr. Bean's projects, we were able to actually get that ball moving pretty quickly as far as being able to do counts. So we were able to get a very recent, literally within the last 2 weeks, a count done at the Beechcroft Cleburne Road intersection. So I think Project Titan had a late fall 2021 count done, which we may have used if we didn't have access to this other count. But we love the fact that we have an updated count because, unfortunately, COVID being what it is and the pandemic, things are still evolving. But I don't have to tell you all, things are blowing and going and just crazy in some respects. So the fact that we were able to get a very recent count for the purpose of this study is incredibly helpful so that we can, I don't want to say it's real time, but it's because the traffic count itself still is a snapshot in time. Those volumes fluctuate from day to day, obviously, but we feel like we've got a good handle, and that gives us the best possible way to be as accurate as we can be. And in the traffic world, a lot of, unlike structural engineering where you're down to the tenth of an inch kind of things, and traffic, we deal a lot of in probabilities and estimates and forecasting, and it's not an exact science. And you go through your all's business, the more experience you have, you kind of know how to kind of work with that. But you do have to have an understanding as we go through this. A lot of these are estimates, and we tend to be conservative when we do this. So we keep that all in mind, whether it's being conservative when it comes to cost or conservative when it comes to trip generation and the distribution and everything that we do. So it's a little bit different animal than some other engineering disciplines, but it kind of is what it is. But we can say that the build-out year that we will be looking at is 2026. So why is that important? Well, of course, we've been talking a lot about the trips that these different developments have on the intersection. Well, the other thing that we take into account is just what we call ambient growth. There's just this kind of background growth that just naturally happens in the community. And that's part of the puzzle when it comes back, even back to the equitable share component of this. When we look at divvying out trips and trying to associate cost on a per project and trip basis, we recognize that this other growth that's just happening in the community, that goes into our future analysis. So that ambient growth, that over in the next 4 years of that growth will actually be taken into account into the calculations that we do. So that's an important kind of aspect of that, is that yes, there's the development that's in the vicinity and specifically referenced in the development projects and what we're analyzing as part of the study, but there's also this kind of ambient growth that we are taking into account. So then that together forms that kind of that total volume that we're trying to look at. So again, just for discussion's sake, this was the count. I know y'all can't read this, but the count that was done a couple weeks ago, I think it was the 12th. No, yeah, it says it on the screen though. May 12th. This is the PM peak hour, which traditionally is the peak hour that we're interested in when it comes to from the equitable share standpoint. We will be looking at both AM and PM peak conditions to make sure that we're looking at kind of both flows based on the peak period, because that directionality matters when it comes to identifying those improvements. But in general, it looks like there's about bi-directional both ways east of the intersection on Beechcroft, about 1,100 cars in the peak hour, give or take, and there's about 450 maybe on Cleburne Road itself, just to give you a sense of kind of the magnitude of the traffic volumes. But this forms our baseline, and then we'll be working from this.
Can I ask you a question?
Absolutely.
Am I on?
That's it.
Oh, there we go. Great, Kelly Beasley. When you're talking about the build-out year, I know at least for us, we're about 100 units a year, maybe, if you wanted to try to average it. We're probably not going to be finished until, goodness, we'd be at 70% 4 years out. So
Yeah.
it'd probably be several more. And I know that some of the folks in this room are just getting started. So when you're talking about your horizon year, that's not going to be the same as the build-out year then, correct? Because we're all going to still be going.
Right,
or
what we tried to
many of us.
establish was generally the maximum build-out year. So if 2026 is not your maximum build-out year for Harvest Point, is that right? Then we probably need to update that. I think that was based on information that we had in the last traffic study. So if your horizon period has changed, and I mean, this is exactly why we're here to learn from you all, and we haven't gotten too far in the analysis. So we want to make sure we establish that. So if you have a different horizon year, we need to know that so that we can accommodate that. As far as the intent is, to answer your question, the intent is to have our horizon year or our analysis year to be congruent with the longest build out of any particular project, so that we're trying to anticipate that. So
Right, currently today, just for scope, I believe that we started development in 2017. I believe the first homeowners moved in early to mid 2018. Now, the beginning is not going to be a good year to track because everybody was just getting started and we were out in the middle of nowhere at that time. So obviously the market's picked up, and I would assume, as many builders are seeing, as fast as we can get lots out, which we're subject to supply chain, we'll be getting the homes sold. People have wait lists right now. So it could be faster, but if you're looking at our averages to date, currently we have a little bit more than 400 homes that we've marked as moving in, but several of those are resales. So I can get you stronger numbers with some analysis. But if we're only 400-ish homes in, that's about 100 homes a year for us right now. So that would put us at 2028, 2029.
okay.
And I know some of the other developers in this room, if supply chain continues to be a problem, probably aren't going to be finished by 2026 either.
Yeah, okay. Well, that's good to know.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
Just as far as information, would you mind giving us, excuse me, how many units are left to be built?
Well, I know everyone in this room is looking at me because it was on my study, so I brought some informative information, just so we can all be on the same page of where we've come from and where we're going. So we came through in 2016. We were Ordinance 1612. We had some language specifically put into this ordinance because we were some of the only people out there at the time. I'm going to read to you directly from what is in our ordinance and our pattern book, among other documents. With regard to additional off-site widening improvements to Claiborne Road and Beechcroft Road, which later it's traffic signal, so I'll cut to the chase there, recommended by the traffic impact study for Harvest Point, it's requested that additional improvements be reevaluated at 50% build-out level in order to account for an equitable distribution of area-wide roadway improvements amongst other properties developing within this area. In conjunction with city staff's recommendations, it's the overall intent that the properties improve their roadway frontage on these streets as they develop. Should other properties develop prior to Harvest Point reaching their 50% build-out level, these developments shall be responsible for their respective portion of the widening and signalization improvements. Now, with that being understood, fast math, we have 1,188 units that are entitled today. Around 400, I would say it's less than that, are currently occupied, which is the triggers for our traffic impact improvements. That means we're about a little bit less than a third of our development. So according to our traffic study, we were just supposed to be doing, I think, the portion that's already been done up at Beechcroft and Claiborne for turn lanes, and that has been done. We don't have our next trigger to widen Claiborne Road, which has been done until 2 years out. So with that being said, we widened Claiborne Road 2018, was that the year? We were our first year in. So we came in, we worked out a really tough situation, and in fact, according to our vesting, we widened more of Claiborne Road than we actually had to do. So today we sit here, hopefully with an improved road that we want to be a part of the solution. Our traffic signal is not required until 70% build out, which would be another 4 years. So as long as we can sit here and all come up with a reasonable solution, we want to be a part of making this area safe in a wonderful place that's marketable for all of us. But that being said, you know, we have done a whole bunch of stuff ahead of the game.
Yeah, so I guess specific to Harper's Point, what we've been told through the planning office is that your development's responsible for the traffic signal at the 70%. It's hard enough to get just to the 100%, and we're talking about the build out year of 2026 or 2028 or whatever it ends up being.
Sure.
We're not going to be stratifying, you know, like incremental improvements. We're just looking at the end result. So whatever turn lane improvements, I think some of this is to be discussed, and we'll kind of work through this, but our understanding is that Harvest Point would be responsible for the traffic signal and only the traffic signal, and then the other improvements would be a collective of the other developments that are involved. Now, we've not discussed that specifically with the city yet. We know that's to be determined. But what we're trying to just establish is that build-out year so that we can, you know, we understand that the market is going to determine a lot of when the actual build-out occurs on any of these developments. But we've got to just using the best information we have and using the best judgment that we have. We just need to step, whether it's 2026 or 2028 or whatever we agree to, based on the information that we have. That's what we're going to go with, and for purpose of the study. Like I said, I mean, I think it's realistic that a traffic signal is going to be needed at the intersection. That's probably, I mean, that's not foreshadowing too much to say that's going to be one of the recommendations that comes out of this, and based on the information that we've seen and what's been communicated to us, that the Harvest Point would be, you know, involved and responsible for the traffic signal itself.
Sure. I may not totally be following you, but I agree with what you're saying. Obviously, we understand we need to do our part, and we're going to do what our traffic study dictates. We have already done the road widening, so it's finished. That was something that wasn't required of us for another 2 years. So we have been, hopefully, trying to be as good of stewards as we can. And that road, if you want a background, at the time was owned by the county. The land was owned by the city, and it was a quagmire that required a lot of people about 10 years to end up solving a problem for everybody. So we all won in that. We're good. We made a contribution, and we're not getting reimbursed for the road widening that we did beyond the scope of our traffic study ahead of schedule.
Okay.
So I think the part that's up for discussion here is that within our ordinance, it does very specifically say that if there are other developments, because back in that day, we didn't know anybody was even going to be here. We didn't know Harvest Point was even going to succeed at that time. So BOMA was kind enough to work with us to say, we understand we're tagging you with these things, which should have had road widening to be a part of this discussion, but we've taken care of that for everybody in this room. The discussion then would be, the traffic signal is coming, so if before 50% of your build out, more people come in, those people will be responsible to share in the improvements for this area. That's, I mean, Calvin, would you interpret my ordinance that way?
Yes, I would agree, Kelly, and I think that's one of the importance of this study, and to identify what that is. I think as you identified, everyone who's been conditioned, who's here today, ultimately we will have I'll just say a preliminary design that ultimately will be determined what the final design is, and based on that pro rata, everyone will identify the financial contributions that they will make. And through this entire conversation I think when we'll have at times group on one-on-one conversations to get more focused on who will do what, and we can address any uncertainties at that point. But this point is just to do the overall identifying what that improvement is, and then we can get at a later date into, if need be, more into the weeds on, you know, how do we bring together some more complex issues. I think we can do that at a later date, but I don't think that will happen here.
Perfect. And I think we understand, you know, our traffic study was pretty specific on what exactly our improvements were. Obviously, we couldn't predict what was happening today, so it sounds like we need a little bit more intricate of a stoplight than my traffic study originally called. So Harvest Point's ready to do its part, and we're ready to be a part of that conversation. I just wanted to make sure that if you guys had questions, I'm an open book. This is all public record. You know, you can find this from anybody. I'm sure Calvin can get it to you if you don't ask me directly. So if you guys have questions, we're here to be a good neighbor. We're here to be a part of this team. I just want to make sure that everybody understands that, you know, we very specifically understood that we would be putting a lot of capital expense up front, and that BOMA understood that with time, because it was such a long build out, there would be an opportunity that other people coming in could contribute to their respective portion of that development.
Well, I think that's why they're here. I mean, again, I
Absolutely.
think from our view, we try not to get too in the weeds when it comes to assigning, financial commitments or financial responsibility. We're at a higher level. We're just trying, as Calvin mentioned, we're just trying to identify what improvements are needed regardless of, at this stage, regardless of how much it costs, who's involved in actually making it work, happen, constructed. We're just trying to identify what those improvements are at a global level. And then in my mind, there's a pot of money over here that's gonna be contributed by X number of parties, and that total needs to be able to cover the improvements. How it's divvied up, and how it's assigned proportionally, we'll figure that out. And like Calvin said, some of that might be, from our perspective, that's gonna be based on trips. Now, Harvest Point's a little bit special situation because you've been around, as you said, longer, original, and you've got specific edicts, I guess, if you will, in the ordinance, in your all's ordinance that dictate certain things. And that's kind of the reason I phrased it the way I did, that to my knowledge, Harvest Point's done what has been asked and required of your project up to this point. To my knowledge, the only thing that was outstanding and remaining is the traffic signal, and that's why I guess characterized it that way, that the traffic signal would be the responsibility of Harvest Point, but anything else that's required would still be a part of this overall global improvements to the intersection, and we just don't know what that is, and those would be proportioned out appropriately based on, the city's agreements and the individual ordinances and their approvals at the time between Planning Commission and BOMA, depending on what was involved with that. So
Perfect. I guess so and I didn't want to get in the weeds. I just know that everybody in this room was curious as to where we were and what our obligations were.
Yeah.
So I wanted to put that out there. But are we saying that we are hoping that the city takes the ball here and does it, or is that a discussion, or am I doing this, and at what time, like on the high level, what do you think?
Well, I think that's gonna be a further conversation.
Okay.
But as of this moment, of course, the city wants to participate and work with everyone. We'll ultimately determine who would be, I guess, spearheading it. Right now, I think it may, again, be a joint, the city may spearhead it, but I'm not 100% certain.
Okay.
But I think that may be the direction that we're going in.
We're open to options. Great.
And again, our job is just to lay out what needs to be done and give a rational approach to how to achieve those financial obligations and financial needs to make that happen, how it's procured and how it's administered. Sounds like the city's, and we've not really had specific discussions about that. It's something the city will figure out what works best for the team and everybody that's involved. So yeah, okay. Thank you. Just to get back to some of the methodology, again, some of this is more just, again, technical stuff that we'll be doing, but just to kind of give you all a sense of kind of our next steps. We'll be basically preparing those forecast models, and we've talked about the kind of the directionality and trying to assign those trips and how that works out on the street and road network. We'll be doing the traffic analysis and how that plays out with level service. But honestly, in this case, the turn lane and the queuing and storage on the turn lanes are going to be probably just as important as just the signalization itself. Again, I think the signalization is probably pretty evident, but it's the other pieces of the puzzle that will kind of come together for us to figure out how that plays out. But as I said, so again, the red asterisks, for those that can, especially on the phone call, can see these, are kind of meant to indicate where we'll be getting back together. We'll over the next several weeks, we'll be developing the actual analysis and evaluation, and we'll have a pretty good sense of what those technical recommendations will be, and then we'll come back together and talk about that and give everybody an idea of kind of what we're looking. And honestly, there may be some different options. There may be option A, and if you go with option A, this is what looks like will happen. Or we might go with option B, and if you go with option B, this is what happens. So there may be some choices to make as to what the city and the group feels is appropriate. Because again, just to give a conceptual, hypothetical example, we may want a turn lane, or the analysis. It's not about what we want. I shouldn't say it that way. The analysis may show that a turn lane length of 300 feet is needed. But you go out there and there's a huge drainage culvert or a power line that's just makes it a challenge from a construction standpoint. Is that realistic? Is that reasonable to expect? So then we may have different options to go with it to make it as amenable situation as we can, given the circumstances and the situation that's out there. So we'll go through those discussions and definitely be able to put that out on the table for everybody to be able to share and kind of know what's going on. Again, we've talked about the equitable share kind of process and how that looks to play out, and we'll have more discussion of that. And of course, we can talk about the traffic signal related to the requirements with the Harvest Point development. So what our hope is that we'll have that second meeting and kind of lay all that out, and that'll be the main meat and potatoes of what we have to discuss. But we'll go back and with that input and that feedback and decisions that are made as part of that second meeting, we'll go back and basically finalize. That should happen fairly quickly, and then we can come back either in person or even virtually if we choose to, if the group chooses to do so. We can have just kind of a wrap up just to make sure everybody's on the same page, and maybe discuss a little kind of what next steps are from the city and particularly the development teams as kind of what goes forward. And again, some of that will be dictated by what the city wants to do and in relation to working in partnership with everybody here. So that's it. So like I said, again, I apologize for those on the call that we had that audio turned off at the beginning, but certainly we're not in a rush to leave. When it's about 2:30, so we're about an hour into this. So definitely just want to open this up to any other discussion and appreciate all the input that we've had, leading up to this point. So I'll try to be quiet again for a second, and if there's anything that Trey or I can help answer, we'll just kind of open the floor. Calvin, if there's anything that you want to say on behalf of the city or to follow up with anything that we've talked about, it's a good time to do that as well too, if you want it. So anything we can clarify or to as much as we know at this point, to be able to discuss. Yeah,
Will we
sure.
be, before the second and third meeting, will we be getting like copies of the analysis to review? Is that public record, or will it mostly be, contained to the meetings? We'll talk about that information.
I mean, we can certainly share that with you all. And in fact, Trey had a good idea before we got on the mic that we can share this PowerPoint just for y'all's records if y'all want to go back and think about anything we've talked about. Normally, we would just wait till we got to the meeting, just because that's just how it kind of plays out there. Most of what we will have prepared, it won't be a written report or anything like that. It'll be very techy, and which not that would be foreign to you, but just as far as the engineering, traffic engineering, the output of our analysis and whatnot would just be almost like an appendix kind of material. So it won't be real formal or anything like that. But there's nothing predisposing us from sharing that information. It definitely is a public record as far as it's just like you all do your business. It's free to share if whoever wants to receive that. I think what you're getting at maybe is just having it may help you all be more prepared for the next meeting if you all have some information leading into that, and we can. Trey, let's, and I say this out loud because I'm just talking off the top of my head at this point, but maybe we can put together a memo or a little technical packet of something just to give you all a kind of overview of kind of what those results are so that you can be better prepared, and I think that makes a lot of sense to do that. So if that would be helpful, we're more than happy to do that.
Yeah, and if there's nothing formal prepared before the meeting, even if we at the next meeting, I'm sure there'll be more information on the slides, got that afterwards, just so that we have something that we can.
Yeah, I'm sure you'll be reporting to folks that want to know about that kind of stuff as well, so I get that. So to give you an indication what kind of information that would be, I mean, we would be going through, so we'll have figures that show the traffic volumes for each existing conditions, the background, the future conditions, and then we'll be going through our analysis, and we'll have printouts, just like you all see in the traffic studies that have probably been prepared for you all in the past, that we all use kind of the same software, so that, if you have folks on your team that want to look at that's perfectly fine. They'll recognize what we're doing. But we'll share some summary tables of that A through F level service and queuing numbers, so you can see what the analysis shows is what the 50th percentile, 95th percentile, Q estimates are, and that's where our recommendations are going to come from anyway. We won't be making that up, so we can definitely share that. So yes, sir. We have not scheduled that yet. We really wanted to see kind of what, we can certainly talk about that. I mean, well, like anything else, we're wanting to move as quickly as we can. If we want to talk dates, again, it's hard with everybody's schedules and trying to find and I didn't say this earlier, I appreciate everybody's response on the doodle poll we sent out. I get some of that's a little over my head. That's why I'll let Trey deal with some of that. But But if we want to start maybe looking at a calendar and try to find out some dates, we can certainly talk about that even today, because there's no reason we couldn't start at least penciling in some time. I mean, we really haven't talked how much time we need to do that. But again, like I said, it's one intersection, so it's not a lot of effort from an analysis standpoint, because it's confined to the one intersection. But generally speaking, I think within the next, given the holiday, 2 to 3 weeks, maybe.
So you think you'll have some preliminary design ideas by that time?
Conceptual, so that we won't have, yeah, Joe, we won't have a drawing, but
No,
we'll,
but I mean
but
just
we'll,
some good
yeah,
concepts
I mean,
and
it'll be like in a
concepts.
tabular format where we signal that is what it is, but, if the existing if a turn lane is X feet today, we'll have a pretty good idea what we think it needs to be, going forward. So again, I don't know if we'll have something drawn up per se. We might have something really, archaic, kind of just gross looking, but,
So is that the main focus, is Claiborne, or are we also gonna talk about, Doc Robertson at all, or is that gonna be outside of
yeah,
this equation?
it's outside the scope to
Okay,
look at Dr.
okay.
Robertson.
Okay.
Yeah, we're specifically looking at the intersection, and I would say maybe the approach on Claiborne Road, because that's kind of a pinch point, if you
Yeah,
will,
I agree.
of that. So we will be looking at what the implications are with the developments, and that's why knowing that distribution is going to be important as we get to that point. But it really is just focused on the intersection, and maybe a little bit more loosely the northbound approach as it affects Claiborne Road. That's a good question, but again, not to put y'all on the spot, I don't know if we want to do it this way or not, but if someone just wants to bark out some dates, coming up, Trey, maybe if y'all want some dates that would work I could bring my calendar out. Again, if this is not a good way to do it, we can try to circulate another poll or something, but to answer the question, I think we would hope to be back together.
The way you did it,
With the doodle poll
I
will
think
work?
that would cover it.
Okay, well, I appreciate that. Some folks like to do it that way, and when you get to the sizes, the groups this size, that does help. But I will say, we're at the end of May right now. If I just had to take a guess, maybe toward the latter part of June. Oh, and Trey doesn't cuss at me after a while, just putting him on the spot. But
The ball's in your court now, right?
yeah, well, it is. Yeah, no, and that's why it was good to get the counts when we did. We've got everything. I guess we just need to hone in on that build out year. If we propose, I'll just say this out loud, and those on the call can speak up too if this doesn't fit what your knowledge is of your particular project. Sounds like maybe 2028 needs to be the build out year as opposed to 26. And again, that 2026 date came from, we went through all the traffic studies that we have available to us, and that was the date that was the latest of all of them. But again, knowing the market, things change, but once we set this, we can't keep changing that. So if 2028 sounds reasonable and the Calvin doesn't have any objection to that, then that's generally about a 5-year, give or take a 5-year period, which honestly in the traffic engineering world, when it comes to intersection improvements, a 5-year horizon is actually generally the rule of thumb that we use anyway. So that would make at least sense from that standpoint. So
2028.
is that a question or?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean.
Because we were between 28 and 29, so
Yeah.
2028.
Yeah, I guess it sounds, let's do it, unless there's any objections to that.
No, I just had a question.
Yeah, no, it's fine, Suzanne, go ahead.
Do you anticipate communicating with the individual parties before?
We're gonna try to refrain, now the city might, for their
Okay.
purposes, but for purposes of the analysis, we're gonna try to keep everything in this environment.
Okay.
Now, I will say, if we have a specific question about, hey, where's your driveway, or this square footage, is this square footage still accurate? Because again, we're taking this information out of traffic studies or site plans that we've been given from the city. We might have an email or something that says, okay, can you verify this? But anything beyond that, we're just trying to do it more in a public view so that we're not saying one thing, and Lord knows I'm known for change. I don't want to change my answer later on. And because again, at the end of the day, we're dealing with developments and partners and teams, financial situation, and we're sensitive to that. So we want to try to keep it on the, being transparent about it. So, but
Right, and we want to make certain that all communications come through the planning department. Now, Gerald and someone working with him may reach out to you with questions, but any questions come through the planning department. If there's multiple questions, we'll tabulate the questions, put them together, and we'll share those with Gerald and his team. But all communications go through the planning department.
that might be a good way to handle it. I mean, if there are more high, broad questions that you all have process-wise, or especially if we get some of the specifics of the equitable share thing, as that continues to kind of flow out, it might be best to funnel that through the staff's department, and from a technical standpoint, we can provide answers or guidance or have that, or just leave it kind of unanswered until we get back together and we can talk about it as a group. Again, there may be an occasion where we reach out to one of y'all just if there's a specific site question that really has nothing to do with anybody else's project or whatever, but I feel like we've got a pretty good handle on that information at this point. So, you know, one example might be the DRG, because that quadrant, as you get there right at the intersection, as we start looking at recommendations, we may look at the site plan and can't tell exactly how much dedicated right-of-way may already be, or how, you know, what kind of facilities that particular development maybe have planned for that particular area of their site, and that may go play a little bit into what improvements may or may not be possible just because of the infrastructure that's there, and you know, those type of challenges. But overall, you know, we'll try to keep that to a group setting, or if there's just, if you're not sure, you can just pass it through Calvin's office, and then if we need to be involved in that answer, we can do that then. So again, I try not to be too complicated with it, but again, just with the number of people involved, we're just trying to be as transparent and open about it as we can be. So anything else we can help answer, or any other questions that y'all might be thinking about? And you know, that includes everyone on the call as well. Try to maybe end. I don't know what happened with that Zoom. Well, if not, we appreciate everybody's time, and hopefully this has been helpful, maybe somewhat informative, but certainly appreciate everybody's participation and time. And I think this is a very interesting, you know, project to kind of work through, and you know, at the end of the day, it's for the benefit of the community, and trying to do what we can to help with things out there. So if there's anything else we can do for y'all in the future, just let us know. But we'll be back in contact, and we can do that doodle poll to find a time late next month to get back together and try to do something similar that we did today. So with that, I hope everybody has a good holiday, and take care of yourself. All right.